The girl looked dead when Elias Carter saw her lying in the blazing dust of the Kansas prairie. For a moment, he thought the sun itself had thrown her down and tried to finish her off. Her dress was torn, her skin was scorched, her lips were cracked open like they were begging for mercy. The sky refused to give. Elias had seen bodies on the frontier before, but never one still holding on with nothing left to hold. He was riding fence line along the Santa Fe Trail that morning. The heat shimmered over the ground like the whole earth was breathing fire. His horse stopped suddenly, ears pinned forward. That was when Elias spotted a faint twitch in the dirt. Barely a movement, more a whisper from someone too weak to speak. He climbed down, boots sinking into the hot soil, and knelt beside her. Her breath rattled in her throat. Her eyelids fluttered like they were heavy as stone. Then she looked at the canteen tied at his hip. Her mouth opened just enough for one broken whisper to slip through. "Put it in my mouth." The words slapped the air between them with a desperation that made Elias feel cold despite the heat. He slid an arm under her shoulders and lifted her head with care. A trickle of water touched her tongue. She gasped like someone tasting life again after being told life was over. Then her fingers clutched his wrist with surprising strength, as if the whole world depended on that one swallow. "Easy now," he muttered. "Too fast will hurt you." She did not hear him. She was lost between this world and whatever waited beyond it, climbing back inch by inch. Her body trembled from exhaustion. Her face was red and blistered. A long trail of churned dust behind her showed she had walked far, maybe through the night. Elias had seen women run before in this wild land, but he had never seen one push herself past the point where even the prairie seemed ready to bury her. While he poured a little more water into her mouth, hoof-beats echoed in the distance. A lone rider appeared on the ridge. He slowed his horse and stared down. From where he sat, it looked like an older rancher kneeling over a young woman who could not move. The rider watched a few seconds too long, turned his horse, and charged toward Dodge City. Elias felt something sink in his gut. Stories in Dodge City traveled faster than a bullet and twisted even quicker. He turned back to the girl. Her hand tightened weakly around his fingers. Afraid that if she let go, she would fall back into the dust forever. Her lips trembled, her voice cracked like dry wood in a fire. "Did he find me?" That single question chilled Elias more than the sight of her broken body, and it left him wondering something he was not ready to wonder. Who was she running from? And what kind of man would leave a girl to die under the Kansas sun like this? Elias lifted the girl into his arms the way a man lifts something he is afraid might fall apart if he breathes wrong. She was light, too light for someone her age, and her head rested against his chest like she had not felt a safe place in a long time. The prairie wind kept pushing dust across his boots as if trying to hide her again, but Elias held her tighter and carried her to his horse. By the time he reached Carter Ranch along the Arkansas River, the sun was sliding low, and the heat of the day was finally letting go. His small cabin stood quiet near the cottonwoods, the kind of quiet that had followed him ever since his wife passed. He kicked the door open with his boot and laid the girl on the only clean bed in the house. For a second, he hesitated, staring at her face, wondering if she would even make it through the night. She woke only enough to murmur a few scattered words, most of them mixed with fear. "Please don't let him find me." Elias poured water onto a cloth and wiped the dust from her forehead. Her breath steadied just enough to ease the tightness in his chest. He set a pot on the stove and boiled beans the same way he had done 1,000 times before, except this time the cabin felt different. There was another heartbeat in the room. Another reason to keep the fire going. He spooned a little broth into her mouth, and she swallowed, even in her sleep, like someone who had not tasted comfort in years. When the fever hit, it came fast. Her whole body shook. Her teeth chattered even though the room was warm. Elias sat beside her and pressed a cool cloth to her face again and again until the trembling slowed. He had once watched sickness take the woman he loved, and the memory clawed at him now. "Not again," he whispered. "Not if I can help it." Through the open window came the sound of coyotes calling across the river. Normally he ignored them, but tonight they made him uneasy. He could not shake the thought of that rider who had seen them on the prairie. A man like that could twist a harmless moment into something ugly, especially if he carried it to the wrong ears in Dodge City, and especially if the man she feared was already looking for her. Just before dawn, the girl stirred and blinked at the ceiling beams. She whispered her name, Lily May. Her voice was small, but it carried more pain than any scream. Elias asked what happened, but she only shook her head and turned her face into the pillow. Whatever she had escaped was still chasing her in her dreams. Outside, the first light of morning touched the river. Inside, Lily tried to sit up and Elias steadied her before she could fall. She met his eyes for the first time, and something in her look made him pause. It was fear, yes, but also a quiet kind of trust. And that was when Elias realized something that made the hair on his neck rise. If she had truly run from a man like she claimed, then someone in Dodge City would come searching soon. But the question twisting in his gut was simple and heavy. Would they come looking for Lily May, or would they come looking for the man who dared protect her? The morning after Lily spoke her name, Elias stepped outside to fetch water from the river. The cool air felt good on his face, but his stomach carried a weight he could not shake. Something was coming. He felt it the way an old horse senses a storm before it shows in the sky. By noon, he saw riders on the horizon, 3 of them. Their silhouettes cut sharp against the sun as they crossed the open field toward his ranch. Elias did not need a second guess. Men did not ride out this far unless they wanted something, and they wanted it fast. Lily was sitting at the table, weak but awake. A blanket wrapped around her shoulders. When she heard the hooves, her spoon slipped from her hand, her eyes fixed on the doorway like she expected the devil himself to walk through. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "Stay inside," he said, but she shook her head as if she knew hiding would not change anything. The rider stopped in front of the cabin. One man wore the badge of a marshal from Dodge City. The second was a clerk holding a folder thick with papers. The third was Clayton Briggs, dressed in fine clothes and sitting tall on his horse like a man who believed the whole world owed him a debt. Briggs pointed at Lily through the open door. "There she is. She belongs to me and that man is harboring a runaway." The marshal cleared his throat, trying to sound official. "We have a complaint filed that this young woman is under contract. That contract says she owes labor and wages. She left without payment. We are here to retrieve her." Lily's knees nearly gave out. Elias stepped between her and the men without even thinking. His voice was calm, but there was something hard beneath it. "She is not property. She is not a mule to be traded. And she damn sure does not belong to you." Briggs smiled the way a snake looks before it strike. "The paper says otherwise, Carter. Law is on my side unless you plan to dispute it with cash." The marshal nodded. "You have until tomorrow morning to come to Dodge City and settle this in a legal manner. If not, we will take her by force under the contract." They turned their horses and rode off, leaving dust swirling in the yard. Lily clutched the doorway, breathing hard. Elias watched the riders go, jaw tight, knowing he would have to face a past he had spent years trying to forget. And as the dust slowly settled, one question rose like smoke between them. "If you think you are the kind of man who sees the truth faster than most folks, then prove it right here and let me see your answer." Elias did not sleep that night. He sat at the table with an oil lamp burning low, staring at the papers the marshal had handed him. The contract felt heavier than iron. Even though it was just a few thin sheets of ink and lies, Lily slept in the other room, breathing soft, and every sound she made reminded him of what waited in Dodge City at sunrise. He poured himself a cup of coffee and let it sit until it went cold. His mind kept circling the same questions, slow and stubborn like an old mule. If he walked into Dodge City, he would be walking straight into the wolves. But if he stayed home, Lily would be dragged back to a life that would kill her slowly. The thought made his chest tighten. When dawn finally pushed through the window, Lily stepped out of the room with a blanket around her shoulders. She looked better than yesterday, but her legs were still weak, her voice still thin, and the fever had only just begun to break. She moved slow, the way someone moves when their body is still deciding whether to stay alive. "You do not have to do this," she whispered. "I'm just trouble." Elias shook his head. "Trouble or not," he said. "No decent man lets someone get hauled back into hell just because the world says it is legal." Lily did not answer. She only looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and fear. Like she was scared of being saved and scared of not being saved all at once. They rode out together. As the sun climbed, the river trailing behind them like a ribbon of silver. The trip to Dodge City took half a day, and Elias could feel his heartbeat rise the closer they got. The town was already buzzing when they arrived. Cowboys shouting, wagons rattling, women sweeping dust off porches that would be dusty again by noon. Elias tied his horse outside the saloon, the same place Briggs had built his little kingdom of whiskey and debt. Lily hesitated, but Elias gave her a steady look. "Stay close. Let me do the talking inside." Briggs stood behind the bar with the smug smile of a man who thought he had already won. "Well, now, Carter," he said. "I knew you would show. Men like you always try to play hero, but heroes pay more than anyone." Elias laid the documents on a table and told Briggs exactly how much he was willing to pay. It was a high price, enough to make any rancher swallow hard. Briggs leaned back, hands folded, eyes bright with greed. He enjoyed every second of watching Elias hurt. To him, this was sport. Briggs tapped the papers with one slow finger and raised his chin. The way a wolf shows teeth without barking, he said he would sign, but only if Elias gave up a strip of grazing land along the river, the land Elias had kept since the day his wife died. Before anyone could breathe, Briggs laughed a dry little laugh and whispered that the land would be his one way or another. The whole saloon held its breath as Elias stared at that greedy smile, knowing the cost had just doubled. But when Elias finished speaking, the saloon went quiet. He looked Briggs straight in the eye and said the one thing that made Lily grip the edge of her chair. "Today, I'm buying her freedom, not your permission." The clerk wrote down the agreement. The marshal confirmed it. Briggs signed, though his jaw twitched with anger. And just like that, Lily Mae Harper became a free woman. With half the town watching, they stepped outside into the sunlight. But the air felt heavy, almost warned them that the story was not finished. But just when Lily stepped into the sunlight as a free woman, something in Elias Carter's face changed. The kind of change that tells you the story is not done. Not even close. When Elias and Lily stepped out of Dodge City that day, the sun was bright enough to make the rooftops glow, but neither of them felt warm. Yet, freedom had a price, and Elias had paid it with nearly everything he owned. Still, as they rode away from the noise of town and back toward the quiet stretch of land along the river, something started to shift in the air around them. But trouble travels fast along the frontier. And before they even reached the ranch, a writer delivered a notice from an old lender Elias had forgotten about. A debt from years ago, one Briggs had quietly bought and transferred the day before. The paper said the ranch was to be seized within 30 days. By the time the papers were done, most of his grazing land would belong to the lender, and all he would have left was the small patch around the cabin and the house itself. It was small at first, like the feeling you get when rain is coming after a long dry spell. Lily kept looking back, not at Dodge City, but at the life she had just walked away from. A life she thought she would never escape. A life that had tried to break her, then leave her in the dirt to die. And yet, she was still here, still breathing, still riding forward beside a man who had every reason to think of himself first, but did not. When they reached the ranch, it looked different than before. That evening, Elias walked out to the far edge of his land, the same patch of earth Briggs had demanded. He stood there with the notice of debt in his hand while the wind tugged at his coat. And Lily stood beside him with a shovel resting on her shoulder. They did not speak, two silhouettes against the dying sun, facing the land they were about to lose, yet neither one willing to bow their heads. It was the kind of silence that can break a person or build them. And in that moment, it built them. The same dusty yard, the same cottonwoods near the water. But now there was a sense of something growing between the cracks of everything they had lost. Lily stepped down from the horse and ran her hand along the wood railing like she was greeting a place that might finally let her belong. Over the next weeks, the ranch became a new kind of home. Smaller than before, simpler, but alive in a way it had not been for years. Lily planted a small row of vegetables. Elias rebuilt the chicken coop, his old hands moving with a steadiness he thought he no longer had. Neighbors who once kept their distance now nodded at him with quiet respect. No one called Lily property anymore. No one dared. Some nights they sat on the porch with the lamplight glowing through the open door. Lily would talk about the things she dreamed of doing and Elias would listen with the kind of patience only a man who has lived long enough to know what matters can carry. He did not try to be her hero. He simply chose to stand beside her. And sometimes that is all the saving a person needs. And maybe that is the lesson tucked inside this old story. Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is to protect someone who has nothing left. Sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is to believe she deserves better than the pain she ran from. And sometimes the life you build after the storm ends up stronger than the life you lost before it began. Now, let me ask you something that only the sharpest folks notice. In your own life, who is the person you would stand up for? Even if the world told you to stand aside, and who is the person you would let help you even when it feels easier to face the fight alone? Every man pays a price in this life. But the worth of that price is measured by the person you choose to protect. And sometimes losing land or money or comfort is nothing compared to the chance to stand tall in your own story. If this story touched you in any way, give it a like so more folks can hear it. And if you want to hear more tales from the Old West told in a way that hits the heart a little deeper, then go on and subscribe to the channel. I promise you the next story is already writing this way. So, let me ask you this, and only the sharpest folks will dare answer. What is the one thing in your life worth losing everything else for?